Good afternoon, everyone. The presentation today will look at child protection and domestic and family violence. So just before we start, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, water and community. I pay respect to the elders past, present and future. So just a brief overlook of what we'll be looking at today. So what is the nature and extent of child safety and domestic violence? So we'll be particularly looking at the exposure rates and statistics. What do we know about the impact of domestic violence on children's development? So we'll be looking at the psychological, social and emotional development and well-being of the child. What are the challenges from the service provider's perspective? So we'll be touching on mandatory reporting, information sharing and departmental issues. How can these challenges be overcome in everyday practice? So we'll be addressing the issues above along with current policies already in place. So child abuse is defined as any harm being either physical, psychological, neglectful or sexual, occurring within a single incident or repetitive over time. Some examples of child abuse can include hitting, shaking, rape, incest, teasing, inadequate clothing and hygiene. Domestic violence is defined as any behaviour being physically, sexually, emotionally or psychologically abusive. This also includes financial control. And domestic violence can occur in any type of relationship, such as spousal, de facto, family relationships and those informal care relationships. So as of 2005, 59% of children involved in the research had witnessed some form of domestic and family violence. In the same study, it was found that 42% of Indigenous young people have witnessed violence against their mother or stepmother. So dual exposure is a term used to denote exposure to both child abuse and domestic violence. It's been found that children doubly exposed to both actually have worse outcomes as opposed to children exposed to just one or the other. So within an Australian context, in a program designed to assist children who have been exposed to both, it's been found that children are actually at a higher risk of suffering other forms of abuse, such as physical abuse and neglect. So what do we know about the impact of domestic and family violence on children's development and well-being? So looking at the physical impact of the child, it can be broken down to a few areas. So specifically, children exposed to domestic violence are actually at higher risk of suffering other forms of abuse, such as maltreatment, neglect. Some of the physical impacts associated with children being exposed can include infants being injured. So if their mum's holding them while the mother is actually being attacked, they can be injured or even killed. Older children often attempt to intervene in the violence. They also get injured by thrown objects, weapons, etc. And child abduction actually also occurs during separation or divorce. So some of the psychological impacts, one of the major psychological impacts is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's very prevalent in children who have witnessed domestic and family violence. So in addition to this, children may feel fear, sadness, helplessness. They may even blame themselves. And this can actually manifest into other disorders such as anxiety. So there's social impact. One of the major social environments for a child is the schooling environment. So children exposed to domestic and family violence often have very poor attendance and don't engage with mainstream education. They may feel socially isolated as they've been told not to tell anyone about their injuries, how they got them, or the violence that's going on at home. So as a result of this, children actually may fall behind in their academic progression, and unfortunately it is very difficult to catch up. So as a result of this, they may also experience bullying, difficulties making or retaining friends, so they don't have that social support network. This can lead to antisocial behaviour, delayed social development, and social anxiety. So as mentioned previously, children exposed to violence are more likely to be violent towards others in their own behaviour. So the cycle of violence. It's been a common trait amongst the literature that violence often gets passed on through generations. According to psychological research, observational learning is responsible for the cycle of violence. For example, a child observes the adults or the parents fighting or using violence. This then becomes the accepted response to an argument as a means of getting what they want or how to treat your partner in general. This violence then can get perpetrated in their own relationships with their spouse, de facto, or any potential children, and therefore continuing the cycle. So just drawing on the psychological, the social, and the physical impacts and well-being of the child, this pretty much sums up why it is important to intervene and to uphold child safety within the community. So what are the challenges from a service provider's perspective? So mainly the mandatory reporting, information sharing, and the lack of appropriately trained staff. So according to the Child Protection Act 1999, mandatory reporters are teachers, doctors, registered nurses, police officers, and early childhood professionals. Some practitioners actually fear reporting potential abuse for the fear of being wrong or in fear of losing the trust and rapport built with their client. In addition to this, several issues have been raised in regards to mandatory reporting, such as the fact that women can actually become victims twice over. For example, if a woman is hit by her husband, she's the victim once. Her child views this violence. She fears going to the police in fear that her child will be taken away. She becomes a victim twice. Unfortunately, given the varied and widely spread use of technology, the vital component of information sharing has been abused in some cases. In late 2016, a police officer assisted a friend who had a DVO against him to find his ex-wife by utilising the police system to gain access to the relevant information. Another issue that has been prevalent amongst service providers is the accessing of information that may not be electronic, so outdated records. It makes it very difficult to make an informed decision when you don't have the background. And information may not necessarily be records provided by organisations. It may be information bestowed upon you by the client. In this case, you need to consider the risk of immediate or potential danger, how the woman will want the information used, the organisational policy and procedures, and the legal and ethical requirements. So some of the departmental issues that have been presented lately, in Central Queensland, a young boy was actually killed. He was known to the Department of Child Safety. So this has raised issues of departmental backlog, and this has raised other concerns such as inadequately trained staff, stressful working conditions, lack of culturally appropriate training programs. So how to address these in your everyday practice? So according to some sources, everyone should be a mandatory reporter. It is believed that this will integrate the community values and promote the overall safety of the children. In regards to information sharing, an integrated practice model is a cost-effective and efficient way of sharing information quickly and effectively. Given the recent media attention around child safety and the backlog and inadequate staff, some departments have actually received additional funding, and over 200 new child safety officers are to be recruited and employed over the coming 2 years. So some of the current policies in place, this one isn't in place in Australia yet. Following in the footsteps of the UK, Clare's Law has been mentioned as a potential tool to combat domestic and family violence. The tool would allow individuals to have access to their potential partner's history in the hope that identifying any past violent history would act as a preventative measure to reduce domestic and family violence. However, there have been numerous positives and negatives. The obvious positive is the preventative measure of allowing women to make an informed decision and furthering that relationship or ending it. One of the major criticisms of the law is the belief that it's a violation of privacy, and the tool could possibly be manipulated and abused. So just to summarise, the importance of child safety in relation to domestic and family violence has numerous factors to be considered, along with specific departmental issues that need to be addressed at a departmental level and a government level. So just to finish everything off, if anyone has any questions or would like to get in contact with me, I've left my email and my phone number on the bottom. Thank you.